what the city is talking about.
The news that impacts you.
Welcome to the Montreal Now podcast.
In 1930, the Republican-controlled House of Representatives, in an effort to alleviate the effects of the the Great Depression, passed the a tariff bill, the Hawley-Smoot Tariff Act, which raised or lowered tariffs in an effort to collect more revenue for the federal government. Did it work? Anyone know the effects? It did not work, and the United States sank deeper into the Great Depression.
Remember that? That's from Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Turns out it's pretty accurate, too. Yes, that was true. That was tariffs back then, but there have been other tariffs as well that the U.S. tried to impose on Canada. I just thought that was kind of a fun way in. So let's get you caught up. Craig Baird is a freelance journalist and amateur historian, and he wrote about this when this whole tariff issue came up, providing some really great insight here, too, as to what has happened historically. So first of all, he is on the line. Craig, thanks so much for your time this afternoon.
Oh, thanks for having me.
I'm going to guess that scene out of Ferris Bueller's Day Off. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It would make you smile every time you hear it. So
absolutely.
let's go back, because that talks about the Great Depression. So that's the 1920s into 1930s. But tariffs from the U.S. to Canada go back almost a century. So bring us up to date. When did this first start?
Yeah, so probably the most famous tariffs were in 1890 when the Tariff Act was passed. And that was passed by William McKinney, but it was during the time when he was a congressman, so about a decade before he actually became president. And those tariffs raised, tariffs on all incoming goods by about 38 to 50%. So it was a pretty substantial increase. And they did it because they wanted to increase the production within the United States, but there was also this ulterior motive of trying to force Canada to become more dependent on the United States, which would then cause annexation and Canada becoming the 45th state.
And how did that work out?
It completely backfired on the United States big time. Canada became more nationalistic. We started to shift our trade much more to Britain. So Britain and Canada's trade greatly increased over the course of the next few years. And in the United States, farmers suffered, the consumers there suffered, but also the Republican Party suffered immensely. In the 1892 elections, they lost the presidency, Congress, and the House, or the Senate. So it was disastrous for them in terms of putting these tariffs in.
So then we move forward to what we just played, this whole Smoot-Hawley tariff, Depression time. This was put forward by President Herbert Hoover at the time. So not as severe at 40 or 50%, but again, a failure?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. It definitely it raised the tariffs on about 20,000 imported goods, and it really hurt, our relationship between the United States and Canada, but also the United States and a bunch of other countries they raised the tariffs on, and really, led to the Great Depression and caused a whole bunch of headaches and problems for just a lot of regular people. They were the ones who suffered both in the 1890s and then with this in the 1930s.
And then, of course, we moved to the 1988 signing of the Free Trade Agreement, which I think everyone thought was a win for both sides. Well, that was then. This is now. Here we are again with this tariff issue, coming up. And I'm sure as a historian here, you look at this and you think, here we go again. This any different this time around than last time from what you can tell historically anyway?
Well, I think with the 1891, there's definitely a lot of similarities, especially with the annexation talk, the fact that Trump idolizes William McKinney, and he was the one who was really pushing forward the tariffs in the 1890s. And there is some major differences, though. Obviously, the trading network now is far more complex. We have a global trading network. Back in the 1890s, we were primarily trading with Britain, a few other places in the British Empire and the United States. So it was much different in terms of that. But also now we have many more trading partners that we can go to. But because of free trade over the past 30 years, our economies are very much intertwined. There's a lot more cross-border traffic. So there are some differences with what now versus the 1890. But in terms of why it's happening, there are a lot of similarities.
Yeah, and I guess I should point out, with respect to William McKinley, the president you first mentioned back in 1890, right, who first brought up this idea of tariffs, you mentioned Donald Trump's a fan. He wants to, of course, rename, I don't know if he's done it already or signed an executive order, to rename, that mountain in Alaska to Mount McKinley from, Mount Denali. So, yeah, someone must have said something about, hey, this great president back 100 years ago or whatever it was, tried to include tariffs. But the part about it destroying the economy never seems to come up.
No, it doesn't, and it seems to be a reoccurring factor when you increase the tariffs on imports coming in. And I mean, back then, tariffs were part of essentially how a government would make revenue. This was well before income tax and a lot of other taxes. So it was par for the course to have tariffs. Canada had tariffs with our national policy to increase east-west trade versus north-south trade, not to the level of 50% by any means, but yeah, it definitely hurts the regular people. With 1890s, it hurt the farmers quite a bit because we started trading our agriculture, produce, and livestock with Britain and other parts of the British Empire, and we just completely bypassed the United States.
Yeah, which makes you kind of wonder how this thing plays out. We found out today, for people just tuning in now, that the tariffs remain in place. We thought there might be a change today. We were told to expect something. The only change is the auto sector, which got a 1-month reprieve today from the president. And again, I mentioned that's only for 1 month, but it's a significant sector here, of course, in the U.S. and in Canada. You look at this at all and think to yourself how it's going to play out, Craig?
Well, I imagine it's probably going to play out similar to how it played out in the 1890s. I think it's definitely going to hurt the Republicans in a few years with the midterms, and then especially with in 4 years with the presidential election. But I think it's also going to heavily hurt their economy because a lot of people seem to think that tariffs are something that other countries pay when, in fact, it's the consumers who are paying that in the country.
And we will leave it at that. I thank you so much. Appreciate your time.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Yeah, you bet.
Bringing you the breaking news and the people making it. Montreal Now with Aaron Rand. CJAD 800.
We have been talking a lot, of course, about tariffs for the last couple of days. And one of the things, and we talked about this actually a couple of weeks ago, I don't think specifically tariff related, but maybe job related more than anything else, was restaurants in this country and how they were going to be affected. Well, now we've arrived at the point where the tariffs are in place. And I'm reading yesterday in a press release from Restaurants Canada, representing, by the way, for people in case you're wondering, about 1 million Canadians, just over 1 million Canadians in that sector, contributing $120 billion annually to the Canadian economy. And now that these tariffs are in effect, there are some issues that need to be dealt with. So Richard Alexander is the vice president at Restaurants Canada. He is on the line. Mr. Alexander, I understand you are actually in Washington, D.C. as we speak.
Yeah, absolutely. I attended a congressional reception and got more stuff planned for the next few days.
So you and all other Canadians, I guess, are waiting with bated breath to see if anything develops later today, which is still a possibility. But for this idea of, considerations that you and people in the industry are looking for, tell us what it is you are asking the government to do or consider.
Yeah, so as you said in your preamble there, we're the 4th largest private sector employer in Canada. And a lot of the items that are being tariffed and potentially retaliatory tariffs, those are related to, a lot of them are related to food. So we're going to be one of the industries that are going to feel the effects of this almost immediately. And we're worried about our employees. We have a lot of employees, and they're going to be hurt by this. They'll probably see some job losses, some business closures. So we've said to government, look, we just finished the GST, HST holiday. We know that holiday created 34,000 jobs over that holiday period in our industry. So, why should government be taxing food at a time when people are struggling with affordability and we've got these tariffs? Not only will it help Canadians with affordability, but it will keep some people employed in our industry, and I think that's a very good policy.
So beyond the idea of extending that GST credit, because I'm guessing that's what you're describing here, is there anything else you want the government to be aware of?
Yeah, so everybody and their dog is out there asking for exemptions from retaliatory tariffs. We're taking more of what I'll call the Team Canada approach. We know that the government has to do this, and we support government with the retaliatory tariffs. But there are certain items in our industry that are almost impossible for us to source other places and access. Those would be things like lettuce, tomatoes, potatoes, believe it or not, and food-safe packaging. So, other things like limes or lemons from the States, we can probably get away without using those. But those items, if they were removed from that retaliatory tariff list, that will help some people keep people employed.
I'll tell you, as I hear you describe the items, I'm thinking to myself, lettuce, tomato, these are things we can get here. Now, obviously, we can't get them year-round, but if we're not getting them from the U.S., which I guess is the natural place they'd be coming from, what other options do you have, or what other options do restaurateurs have?
Well, we have restaurants that are looking right now and have been looking to see if they can source product. The problem with it is there are locations like Mexico where we could potentially get some product from, but everybody is looking for the same thing, and it's going to be very difficult, if not impossible, to find an alternative supplier for those products.
You know, the other issue, I guess, is you're saying everybody's now looking, of course, panicking and looking at the same time. And I wonder at some point if these tariffs, let's assume they stay in place, right, until we know they're not. The question then becomes how much of this actually can get passed on? Like how much pain can someone in the industry feel before that pain has to be passed on to the consumer?
Yeah, I mean, for our industry, we've seen, you know, the increasing costs in food. Food is already up double digits from where it was a few years ago. So we're already dealing with that, and that's led to about half of the industry not making any money, either breaking even or operating at a loss. So this tariff war, although it's not of our doing, it will have an impact on the jobs and the ability of restaurants to survive this. So it's going to be a very, very difficult time for this industry.
I'm sure as you look forward, you have to sort of make these projections, as difficult as they may be. I mean, if we can look at the worst case scenario here, what are we talking about in terms of businesses that will simply have to close up, lay off staff?
Yeah, I wish I knew the answer to that. We don't know the list of retaliatory tariffs yet, so that will have a big impact on the success of businesses to stay afloat in our industry. We've also been lobbying to get rid of these absolutely ridiculous interprovincial trade barriers. Provincial governments seem to be on board with that. That will help for us to access things like alcohol from other places and lower the cost of transportation. So anything we can do around that, I think will help the industry for sure. You know,
it's funny you say that. I heard the Bloc Québécois leader today, Yves-François Blanchet, basically suggest there's no such thing as interprovincial trade barriers. So, which struck me as pretty unusual, given the fact that from what we understand, Quebec has more of them than any other province. So how would that help you? Beyond the alcohol, what else would it mean?
Mainly transportation costs, right? So I don't know what the Premier of Quebec was talking about there. I worked on the Canada Free Trade Agreement years ago, probably about 10 years ago now, and there is a lot of protectionism in Canada. You know, things like transportation. You put stuff on a truck in New Brunswick, sending it to Ontario, passes through Quebec, and it has to have a different first aid kit. You know, stuff that is really, really low-hanging fruit that would reduce cost. It's a burden. It's a burden for transporting stuff back and forth. We know that there's issues with supply of chicken. Each province has their own quota. So there's things that can be done, and never waste a good crisis, I guess. So we're in a crisis now, and it would be great if the provinces could follow the lead of like Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and some others that have said let's just get rid of this ridiculous interprovincial trade barrier stuff that's been in Canada forever.
I would ask you as well, I don't know if it's fair to ask, but I mean, have you talked to people on the U.S. side in the same business, and have they voiced concerns as well, or have you not done that?
Absolutely. I've been talking to congressmen, I've talked to senators, I've talked to some of the large restaurant chains down here in Washington. I would say what was not surprising, but surprising was that there's a number of issues that the industry is dealing with down here with the new administration. There's deportations of illegal immigrants that's happening. There's a whole bunch of other things. Tariffs are in that mix, but it wasn't really resonating as how impactful this was going to be on Americans. And then after the tariffs were announced by Trump, the retaliatory tariffs, I can assure you they're paying attention to it now. It was almost something nebulous that they weren't really thinking about or worried about to the same extent that Canadians were, for sure.
Yeah, interesting that it took that to kind of wake them up and realize what it could do to their economy, just not specifically only ours.
Yeah, absolutely. But they're aware of it now, and we work with a number of trade negotiators that have been involved in this for quite some time. Previous trade agreements and dispute tariff wars and things like that. And the advice that what they're saying to us is like the only way that you're going to get the Trump administration to move on this is if the Canadian tariffs and the American tariffs increase get inflation to go as high as possible and as quickly as possible, and then the citizens of the U.S. start to see the price of everything go up, and then they will put pressure on their elected representatives, and then they'll put pressure on President Trump. So that's unfortunately that's what's got to happen. And what I've seen here in the last few days, they need to feel the pain in order for this to end.
Mr. Alexander, I thank you for the time, and obviously all Canadians hope for the best on this. Thanks so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
The very latest news, reported and discussed. Welcome back to Montreal Now on CJAD 800.
Chris, I talked about potholes, hit one the other day. I have never seen so many potholes in a season. And yes, I know. I have to preface that by saying everybody knows you live in the city. We're going to have a pothole problem. I've never seen it as bad as it is this year. You mentioned in your piece 2024 broke a record for pothole notifications. So what's your recourse as a citizen? You're a driver. It's not marked. You come across it, boom, you get a flat tire. You just eat it? That's the end of the story?
Yeah, and just to add to what you said, not only is it we're likely to break that record again, but a report came out where we did a survey of all the roads in Quebec, and it's in really, really bad shape, especially the smaller roads. Yeah, they're talking about billions of dollars that need to be invested to restore, drivability. But that being said, to answer your question, it's becoming more and more probable that if you drive in the city year after year, that you're going to run into these potholes and you're going to have damage to your potholes. Now, long ago, the city was very smart. They enacted legislation that says we're not responsible if you drive over a pothole and you cause damage to your tire or to your suspension. So they protect themselves in that front. However, with years and years of citizens going to court and challenging the city, what the courts have done is basically they've made that law as restrictive as possible. So if you have damage to your vehicle that's not your tire per se, but maybe your rim, or not your suspension per se, but it could be a bumper or any other components in your vehicle, well, they have given the green light to get compensated on those matters as well. So what I recommend to everyone is if you drive over a pothole and you have damage to your vehicle, the first thing you want to do, take pictures of the pothole, understand how big it is, have an idea of how deep it is, and document it, and then get the damage evaluated by a reputable garage or a dealership. And you want to submit your claim within 15 days to the city. That's your time limit to do so. That basically saves your recourse against them. Should they say no to you, you can still follow up with a claim at small claims court and go for your damages. And, many people are very pessimistic about that, but there are record numbers of people filing in court, and they're getting judgments. I looked at a whole bunch before I jumped on the air with you, and people are winning their cases. If they're prepared properly, they can win.
So I want to just understand one thing. Are you saying that if it's not just about a tire or just about suspension, you have a better chance, or did I get that wrong?
Yeah, you have a better chance if it's not just a tire.
Okay.
Because they've protected themselves when it comes to like a flat tire, for example. They have legislation that protects themselves, or a suspension issue. They have legislation that they try and protect themselves. But that being said, they cannot contract their way out of negligence. The law says you have to prove that the city was negligent, right? So has a pothole been there for 3 weeks? That's been considered way too long.
Okay.
How big is the pothole? The bigger it is, the more attention it requires. So all of these different things should be looked at. But, not to get too technical, the first thing you should do if you're driving home and unfortunately hit a pothole, take pictures where the street is, where's the pothole, how big the pothole is, and document everything. And once you get to file that within the 15 days on the city's website, what that does is basically save your recourse against them to be able to file with the city claims process. Otherwise, you have to go to small claims court within 6 months.
So question, what's the difference? You're talking about city streets. Now I'm talking about one that was on the entrance to the Ville-Marie Tunnel. So obviously you can't go back and necessarily take a picture. You'd have to do it like 3 a.m. if you're going to do it. But right. I'm trying to understand her jurisdiction. It's a city street. It's a provincial highway. It's a
right. It's a provincial highway. Yeah. Transport Quebec would be the ones that you'd be targeting your claim against. It's the same thing. Whether it's a city of Montreal or another city, or it's Transport Quebec. It's just the same principle applies. They have to maintain the roads, and they have to be reasonable and diligent when it comes to that. It doesn't help, what the city has said, it takes them minutes to fill up a pothole. They have a pothole crew that's out with a truck, and they say it takes minutes. Well, that doesn't help their cause if they're in front of a court and they say, we didn't get around to it, it's been 3 weeks. If you can repair potholes within minutes, well, then there's no reason why we should have massive potholes that are on streets for 3 or 4 weeks. Kind of like snow removal, right? They're the same situation. And as well, the fact that budgets haven't gone up for potholes when they're becoming worse and worse every year, well, that's also something that doesn't help their case. So no question that Montrealers have recourse. The only thing I can tell you is don't sit around and say, I'll get to it later, because if you don't, you might lose your rights simply because it took too long to file your claim.
So if you can, first of all, you're saying you're seeing more and more of these claims. Are you seeing, did you mention more and more people winning these claims?
Right, yeah. So the judgments that I've seen, they're successful, and sometimes they don't get the full extent of their claim, but they do get something. And some of the arguments that were I guess accepted by the court in the past, let's say 25 to 30 years, are not being accepted today, because they're being a lot more demanding on the city. And the city has technology now. We have a lot more resources available to us to be able to know where these potholes are. So they expect more out of the city as well. So I am seeing more and more people go to court, and they are having success.
Okay, and Chris, what's the process here? Can you go online to do this? Do you have to send in, if you're doing pictures, you can still do that online. How do you do this?
Yes, if you go on the city's website, they have a claims page where you can file your claim. And that doesn't just go for potholes. That goes for damage to your home, your fence. Could be your property with a snow removal truck. Could be a parked car. So there's a claims division where you can file your claim online, and you can submit all the evidence that you have online.
Okay, and if you are going to end up going to small claims court because your claim is first of all denied, what are you looking at as a wait? Is it months? Is it a year? Because I'm guessing the more people go, the longer it's going to take. Right.
You're looking, it depends on which jurisdiction you're in, but it used to be something like 2 years.
Oh.
Now, since they've raised it to the threshold to $15,000, it looks like some delays have come down a bit. So I would say it's more months than it is years.
All right. So you're not getting a check tomorrow, in other words?
Not tomorrow, no.
Okay. All right. Small claims court, the way to go. And by the way, there's a cost to that as well, is there not?
There is a cost. It'll probably be a couple of $100, but those are reimbursable if you have success in court. Yeah,
okay.
Exactly.
Chris, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Aaron.
Drive carefully. Okay, there you go. For anybody else encountering this pothole problem, that's what you do. And he said you can do it on the city's website. Make life a little easier for you as well. Good luck with that.
Bringing you the breaking news and the people making it. Montreal Now with Aaron Rand. CJAD 800.
All right, we talk tech every Thursday afternoon, and this week is no exception. Carmi Levy, CTV tech analyst, is on the line. Carmi, I didn't think we'd have to talk about this, but we do. We're finding out today, for people just tuning in now, that Canada has a 30-day reprieve, or just less than 30 days, till April 2nd. As far as the tariffs are concerned, that announcement made, I think, about 45 minutes ago. So Canada and Mexico, both of them, anything that falls under the USMCA agreement will now have a 3.5-week wait till April 2nd, as I said. And, it's interesting, in all the talk about what's going to be affected in grocery prices and steel and aluminum and cars, we didn't really talk about tech very much at all. So is there a component here that we should be aware of?
There is, because we know that Canada has slapped a list of counter tariffs on the U.S., and Justin Trudeau has confirmed that despite the 1 month, delay, the exemption, which of course on April 2nd, we're right back where we started. Canada is not removing its counter tariffs, and so that list has a number of interesting things on it, including vacuum cleaners, laundry machines, and video game consoles. And so if you're thinking of buying an Xbox or a PS5, you might want to do it sooner rather than later, because they will be subject to those tariffs, and those tariffs are not going away. Interestingly, things like smartphones, laptops, cameras, tablets, things like that are not on that list. And so officially they're not subject to it, but we've seen it's almost like whiplash, right? Back and forth. Almost by the hour, there seems to be another new wave of headlines. It's hard to tell what will and will not be subject to any kind of punitive action. And also at the same time, the Canadian dollar, of course, we know has been significantly weakened relative to the U.S. dollar. That has an impact on Canadian pricing for all electronics, regardless of what happens with tariffs. So we're already seeing upward pressure on electronic devices, even if they're not directly being tariffed by the Canadian government as they come in. So keep your eyes open. If you do have a purchase on your roadmap for this year and you're thinking of buying something, you may want to move sooner rather than later, because the longer you wait, the greater the likelihood that it will be affected in some way by what we're seeing happen between Ottawa and Washington.
So you brought up an iPhone, for example, and I heard someone mentioning today, the iPhone itself, there are parts in there manufactured in, 10 different countries before they actually put the iPhone together. How do you even know? How would that work? If your iPhones are also built not necessarily in the U.S., right? Some are built in China. So if Canada's importing them from there, where's that duty? Does that come into effect? How would it work?
Yeah, that's the problem. Is the device that you have in your hands is composed of multiple components that are sourced through a very complex global supply chain, and so just the iPhone that I'm using now has parts of it that are from China, that are from India, Vietnam. Some are made in the U.S., not many. None of them are made in Canada, as far as we know. And ultimately, most iPhones that reach Canada are assembled in China at one of their giant factories. Apple is diversifying that, but not fast enough. It is building factories in India and Vietnam. So, if you look at all the parts that could be subject to some kind of tariff action, it means that bit by bit we're going to see upward pressure on this price. It might not happen immediately. It might be longer term, but it's pretty clear that if this tariff war drags on any longer, that iPhone that you use, the Android phone that you want to buy, the laptop, it is going to cost more because it's composed of parts that some of which do originate from China, would be subject to this action on behalf of the U.S. government.
So that tip again is, if you have a major purchase, maybe sooner rather than later is not a bad idea.
Exactly. And learn a little bit about where the stuff comes from. For example, if you're buying a Samsung device, in many cases, Samsung will direct ship their inventory to Canada, not through the U.S., not through their American headquarters. That makes a difference in terms of tariff impact or potential tariff impact. The more direct you can go to the Canadian market, the less the likelihood that it will be affected by what we are seeing here. So it doesn't hurt to ask. If you're thinking of buying something, ask, have you heard about the price, the potential price impact for tariffs? That might determine when you buy, might help you kind of lock down your timing, maybe save a few bucks along the way.
All right, let me move on to this story. So it's Fraud Prevention Month, as it turns out, and this is interesting. We had a story, I think just yesterday or the day before. There was a major bust in Montreal, 25 people, West Island. All this had to do with another grandparent scam. So obviously for Fraud Prevention Month, or Scam Prevention Month, maybe that's a better way to phrase it, what are we learning here? What are we being asked to do, or what are we being told here to prevent this stuff from happening?
So we're hearing from the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre, the Competition Bureau, the RCMP. They're all teaming up for Fraud Prevention Month, and they're saying that impersonation fraud, which is really at the core of these grandparent scams, it's you get a call and they're pretending to be your grandchild. In some cases, they're even using artificial intelligence to clone their voice to make you believe that they've been arrested, they're in trouble, they need money. That impersonation fraud is one of the fastest growing forms of fraud, and they're making resources available. They're partnering with over 80 organizations across the country to help Canadians recognize when they're on the receiving end of one of these fraud attempts. How do you recognize it? How do you act? How do you not become a victim? And then how do you report that fraud once you become aware of it? And so it is absolutely critical that, we become aware of what these look like, and that we have these conversations within our families so that if they get that call, they know what to do. They know how to sort of hit the pause button, reach out to a trusted individual who can then help them through and prevent them from becoming a victim. I've received too many calls, too many visits to my house, too many emails, you name it, from victims, and each one is heartbreaking, and we are seeing more and more of them. The victimology, it isn't just senior citizens, it is all ages. Many people don't report them because of embarrassment and shame. So the numbers that we're seeing, $638 million last year alone, is probably only 5 to 10% of the total amount, which means we are losing tens of billions of dollars per year to this kind of crime, and it's just getting worse at an incredibly steep rate.
Let me talk about, I saw this story and I thought to myself, okay, for everybody out there who either has a Google speaker or an Alexa speaker, I'd never really thought about the AI part of it because the AI is ChatGPT, that kind of stuff. But I understand Amazon is now working on an upgrade. So your Alexa becomes someone you can actually have a conversation with?
Yeah, so I mean, we all know that Alexa is an electronic assistant. It works a lot like Apple's Siri or Google Assistant, where you ask it a question, it gives you an answer.
Right.
It's almost like a voice-activated search engine. They've been around for about a decade, and quite frankly, they're not all that good. In many cases, they can't give you the answer that you need. If you pause in the middle or if you stumble, it can't give you the right response. The technology was introduced with a lot of fanfare, but it really hasn't lived up to its potential. And so Amazon has essentially given Alexa an AI brain transplant, and they're calling it Alexa Plus. Which is essentially means you can talk to it. You can hold an entire conversation with it. It will remember who you are. It'll know what your personal preferences are. And instead of just answering simple questions, it can actually do entire tasks on your behalf. Like, for example, let's say you want to buy some concert tickets to something at the Bell Center. You can tell it to do that, and it'll go off and do it on your behalf. No more you sitting on a phone line or you refreshing on a website or an app. It'll actually do that on your behalf. It'll cost about $20 a month if you want to subscribe to it. But if you're already an Amazon Prime member, it's included in Amazon Prime membership, and it will work on most recent Amazon Echo and Amazon Echo Show speakers and screens. And so there's a list on the Alexa website of which devices will run Alexa Plus. But basically, if you've bought one of these devices within the last couple of years and you're already a Prime member, it's going to be a free upgrade for you, and it's essentially an electronic assistant, but way better than what you're used to.
Can you actually can you qualify it by saying not just buy me a pair of tickets, find the best price for a pair of tickets, things like that?
Exactly that. It's part of what we call agentic AI or AI agents, which is essentially we're moving beyond it's simply answering questions. We're moving to the point where it's essentially like a robotic butler. It does things for you. If you want to take a vacation, for example, Alexa Plus, in theory, and they've shown demos of this, it can actually go and book an entire vacation, flights, rental cars,
wow,
hotel, you name it. Now, of course, would I trust the technology to that point? Well, this is Amazon. Personally, no, but it really does show where artificial intelligence is going, and this is really the first example.
Okay.
Apple Siri is getting an AI transplant as well. Apple's working on it, and Google, they're incorporating that technology into Google Assistant. Google Gemini is the platform, but every major company is working on this because they think that's going to be the way we use computing in the future, kind of like Captain Kirk on Starship Enterprise. Just ask a question, and it'll do all the work for you.
Pretty amazing. I got to wrap up. I would just ask you, so you do this every day. What's your favorite AI right now? What do you use more than anything else?
I'm using ChatGPT simply because I use it for brainstorming a lot. And so, like, if I'm not sure how to fill out a list or I've got a blank screen and I want to get some ideas just in front of me so I can get my brain rolling, I just have conversations with ChatGPT and it kind of gets me started.
Okay.
And then I pick up from there.
And that's where we leave it. Carmi Levy, our CTV tech analyst. Thank you, Carmi.
Great being with you, Aaron. Thank you.
You too. Take care.
This has been the Montreal Now podcast
Listen live on your radio weekday afternoons from 2 to 6
on CJAD 800.
or through the iHeartRadio app.